The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the podcast series. I am, of course, your podcast mogul, Phil Better, and I'm happy to have Derick from the Underrated podcast talk to us about his show and what started his love of podcasting. So, Derick, thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Now, you have a movie podcast, right? This is what Underrated is. It's talking about movies, I'm guessing, that are underrated or people don't acknowledge how amazing they are, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Movies that are, underrated or underseen or underappreciated, stuff that did bad at the box office or, critically, just what, as long as more people need to see it, we kind of talk about it on our show.
Awesome. And how long have you been podcasting?
So I've been seriously podcasting for coming up on 3 years now.
Let's go. 3 years podcasting.
Yep.
And what started? Okay, so I'm gonna just shut up for a second. I'll let you introduce yourself and let us know a bit about your podcast. So go right ahead and introduce yourself to my audience.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Derick McDuff. I'm a podcaster, as you said. My main show is Underrated. I do a couple other side hustle podcasts, but that's my main one. I'm a writer as well. I work for sites like Watch Mojo. I'm doing freelance stuff. Written some fiction and stuff, nothing published yet, but I'm a really big movie fan. Movie buff. Just kind of love film in general and love writing and love talking about it. So kind of I put that all together at some point. Eventually, they all came together and became a podcaster.
All right, and what made you want to jump into the world of podcasting? Was there a specific podcast that you listened to that was like, yes, this is what I want to do, or did it just organically flow into podcasting after writing for so long?
Yeah, I did. There is a lot of podcasts that I listened to. The kind of one that was my gateway podcast, the first one I got really into was the Weekly Planet.
Oh, I know that one.
yeah, it's great. That's awesome. So that was kind of like that got me into podcasts, and I started listening to that, and then through that, I started listening to a lot of other film podcasts. Stuff like The Ringer or Beyond the Screenplay is another one that I love. That's probably my favorite podcast right now. Not even stuff that's not necessarily about film, stuff like Podcast The Ride. I'm a really big fan of. I just kind of got really, really into that. And I had a couple friends who are also really big movie people, and they're also into podcasts. Different, usually they're like kind of into a lot of different stuff than I am. Like my co-host Ariel, she's really into like the Rooster Teeth stuff, which is a little out of my wheelhouse, but I appreciate as well. But her, me, and my friend Alan, who all work together, would kind of always just go to movies together, and we still do, and just kind of like talk for hours and hours and hours after the movie about what we just saw. And we're kind of like, maybe we should at one point record this. And, eventually we were looking for a while to come up with an idea for a podcast, for a movie podcast, and we settled on Underrated.
I like it. And so how did you decide on the name Underrated? Like what made you decide, hey, we're going to look at movies that are underrated by the mainstream?
So because we'd been looking for that hook for a while, because we knew we wanted to do a movie podcast, but there's a million podcasts that are just on movies. So we wanted to do something, kind of unique and different, and that would be special and meaningful to us. And so we were kind of kicking around the can for months, and then one day I'm just sitting watching Netflix. I was watching that movie Stardust, which is
such an amazing movie.
Exactly. And I think really underrated. And we were in this group chat where we're always talking about movies, and we're like, what's everybody up to? And I was like, oh, I'm just watching Stardust. And we all kind of were like, that's a really underrated movie. And then it all just clicked for us right there. As soon as we were like, oh, this is underrated, we were like, we all of us, like at the same time, we're like, that's it. That's what the podcast is going to be. We're going to talk about underrated movies, because we just knew, like, oh my gosh, there's this gold mine of like hidden gem movies and stuff that people don't talk about on podcasts that we can totally talk about these movies that are really, really meaningful to us, that people haven't seen.
I love it. No, and it's true. Like I was just looking at some of the movies. Like the most recent episode, as of recording this podcast, was back in January. Was You're Next?
Yeah, that was a fun one. We had a guest on from another podcast, and he suggested that one. I hadn't seen it, and so I had a ton of fun watching that one. So that's kind of what's great about it is taking these movies that more people should know about and like getting to introduce them to people. And a lot of times I even get introduced to these movies, whether it's through a guest or we rotate our picks. So me and my two co-hosts, sometimes it'll be a movie they'll pick that I've never seen before that I'm like, wow, this is really good. How did I never see this?
I love it. I like the fact that you're rotating through who gets to choose the movies, because then it doesn't get boring. Like, oh, okay, Derek's picking another movie. Jesus, we're gonna watch a comedy. God, but you get this. Everybody gets the freedom of choosing a movie, and it lets your audience know that, like, hey, if you have, do you take audience suggestions?
Yeah, we're always looking for audience suggestions. I'm always like, if somebody suggests a movie, I'll try and watch it and then consider it for the podcast. So I'm always looking for picks, because there's so many underrated movies that we don't know about either.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. Thanks to like Netflix and Amazon Prime, we're getting access to like billions of movies that like we never
Yeah.
heard of.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
So you've been podcasting for 3 years. You have multiple side podcasts, as well as this being your first one. Um, why do you feel like your podcast is better than other movie podcasts, or different than other movie podcasts, apart from just the fact that you're going under underrated movies?
I think that we do kind of bring I guess, unique perspective on it, because we are all kind of like, the three of us are very different. We're all big movie buffs, but we all kind of come at it from different ways. Me being a writer, I really appreciate like the screenplays of it and stuff. I'm kind of like I had mentioned Ariel. She is more kind of like in the Rooster Teeth camp. Like that's the kind of podcaster she is. Where I'm kind of like, I guess, more of like in the vein of like trying to be like a Dan Merle or something like that. So I think we do, and you see that with both our picks and kind of our analysis of movies. So I think that we do kind of bring in our own unique perspectives, and are able to kind of she says something that I might not have thought of, and I say something she might not have thought of, and Alan says something neither of us have thought of. So I think we're with our different I guess ways of looking at film that you might not see from somebody who is in the film industry, or or is like a director or something like that. We all kind of are just having our unique things. And I do try to like read a lot of books on scripts and screenplays and have a really keen eye for that, but I might not necessarily notice something in terms of special effects or something, where that's more like Alan's wheelhouse. Will come in with like, oh yeah, this guy, this horror, like he's really into horror, for example. So he always comes in with like these great picks for these underground horror movies that I would never have thought of. And he's like, actually, this director did this and this and this, and all these, the practical effects in this were made this way, and something I wouldn't have known. And so I think that we do give a unique perspective, especially between the three of us.
No, I like that, having that different viewpoint for who gets to like bringing knowledge to the table, and that's very important when you have a podcast, because if you're a solo podcaster, your voice is the only thing heard, and it's harder to create that connection with your fan base if you're not able to kind of like rip off of one of your colleagues or your co-host, right? If you're just by yourself talking to the void, you sometimes may be like, am I getting everything? Am I missing anything? But when you have those co-hosts are bringing a different point of view and actually enjoy different types of podcasts, that allows to bring in more flavor, I guess, to the show.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And if like you said, if it was just a solo podcast and it's just me kind of like giving my thoughts on whatever movie, it's just going to be one point of view, and it's going to be worse for the viewer, but also for me, because when we're talking, a lot of times I've discovered like, what, like this movie, I didn't appreciate this part of it, and I'll come out of it the other side appreciating the movie a lot more than when I started the podcast. I'll start like, if it's an episode on a movie that I might have thought was like an okay movie, but then through the process of kind of like talking it out with whoever suggested it, and I see what they love about the movie, it really deepens my appreciation for it. And I think that really um, kind of presents itself to the listener as well, though they are able to kind of like, get that appreciation that we all feel.
Yeah, no, it's true. You can. I love hearing about someone else loving a movie, even if I may not have enjoyed it. And I was going to bring it up, like, what happens when someone's saying this is an underrated movie, and you watch and you go, it is deservingly underrated because it's XYZ, because it's not that good, or it's way off mark or something like that. Like, have you guys had that issue where like one person, let's say one of your co-hosts, suggests a movie and for you it was like this is not even worth our time. It's not like valid. Has that ever happened so far in the series?
There has been a few times where somebody has suggested a movie and it just hasn't worked for one of the other co-hosts, but I think we are always able to kind of at least appreciate it. Like we'll definitely have like voice like, "Oh, maybe this part didn't work for me. This didn't work for me." But I think like at least from my point of view, unless a movie is something that is completely just like devoid of any creativity or like, emotion, something like
Sharknado.
Sharknado or like the Emoji Movie, like is one of like there's
I'm
very
sorry,
few.
sir. There is a lot of emotions in the Emoji Movie. They show it all the time. You have the poop emoji, the smiling emoji. Like there's full of emotions right there, sir.
Emoji, that's where it comes from, right? Emoji is it's sort of emotional something, right? But
Yeah.
it's unless it's something like that where it's just, a product. I think
Mhm.
that every movie, even a movie I really dislike, I can find something to kind of appreciate and talk about. And even if the movie misses for me, I can still be like, well, I appreciate this and this and this. And a good example is I think one of our best episodes is the movie 13 Ghosts, which we did for
Amazing movie.
Halloween.
It's an
Was that?
awesome movie. I love that movie.
See, yeah, and that's the thing. Like Ariel suggested it, and it was for her Halloween pick a couple years ago, and like it didn't click for me. I was like, all right, this movie, it just like didn't spiral on my cylinders, but I still appreciate it. All right, I still am like, you know what? It didn't work for me, but I get why it works for you. I get why people love this movie. It has this like early 2000s, just kind of like campiness and fun horror, just goofiness that I really appreciated. And I was like, okay, well, it didn't work for me, but I can look at it from an angle where it's like, yeah, someone like you or Ariel like really loves this movie. And I love that. Like as long as somebody out there loves the movie and it's not just a blatant cash grab, and as long as it's, works on whatever level, then yeah, I can find something about it to talk about that is fun. I might still be like, oh, okay, this and this doesn't work for me, but I could still be like, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's have fun hashing it out, and like, let's have a good time with this.
I like that. And do you guys record all in the same place, or is it over like Zoom or StreamYard like we're doing right now?
So yeah, we started out all doing it in the same place, and then we decided to transition like a couple months before the pandemic to digital, just because it was just kind of a lot to just kind of get together and like record all the time, and B just because it's a lot better for the audio. I found that like if you go back and listen to our early episodes when we were like recording together, like we did not have like a recording studio or anything like that. It was some rough audio, and I'm also the person who edits it, and like it was kind of a
Oh,
nightmare to be like, oh man, like let me try and like get out this background noise or whatever. And it's so we use Discord, and I've found a lot of really good tools with just kind of like using bots and stuff for Discord to record separate audio tracks has been really helpful for me as an editor.
yeah, no, Discord has that amazing thing that just records for you and you just can talk. Yeah. I've done a
Yeah.
few podcasts using Discord, and it's always interesting because I'm not used to Discord. I
Mhm.
need to see usually the person I'm interviewing, so I use StreamYard, so it's a little easier for me. But yeah, that's great that
Yeah.
you're using a different platform to record your audio that's not normally done. And like Discord is mainly for, gamers. It grew up for the gamers, and now everybody's using Discord. But I like that you're recording your episodes on that.
Yeah, yeah, and then we also do a record the episodes. So I have just record the audio, but we also put up just something on YouTube too. And Ariel will do the audio podcast. She just kind of like screen captures our Discord call that we all do just through video. So it's kind of the
Nice.
best of both worlds, I guess.
There you go. There you go. Um, so what is it that you find like the best part of podcasting? Like what is it about podcasting that really drew you to the realm?
Well, I've always, been a really big fan of film criticism and stuff, and I've, like I said, kind of gotten some freelance work and some gigs writing about movies, but it's all very structured and stuff, and podcasting is kind of like a nice middle ground between like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write a review about this movie and why I liked it, and also the just kind of like feeling of going to your friends after a movie and just kind of like talking and like being very conversational and being like, okay, yeah, I like this and this and this, and this is it. Kind of gets you know the best of both of those, where you get to kind of like have a conversation and play off somebody else and just kind of be like, okay, this and this and this, but you still have the critical eye. I still take notes and stuff on the movies. I still go in with like, okay, I'm going to talk about this and this and this. So it does provide a really interesting way to kind of tackle film criticism. And I think it's more engaging than a lot of written criticism, which I still obviously love. But, if you're out going for a jog or cooking or, driving to work or whatever, you can just kind of pop in a podcast, and it's something where you don't necessarily have to watch it. You don't have to, stop and read it. You can be passive. You can be doing other things, but you're still taking in all this information, listening to all this criticism. And that's what really drew me into it as a listener originally was, I would be at work, doing an overnight or something. And I'm like, all right, pop in my headphones and listen to people talk about movies or whatever while I'm just kind of doing whatever task. And then, I figured like, hey, this is something that I could be into, that I could do.
I like that. I like that. I also noticed that you guys have a Patreon.
We do. Yeah. Yeah.
How's that going? Because I haven't talked. I talked with one of my a former guest about his Patreon off air. Instead of recording like a smart person, I talked to him off air about it. But I want to know, like, have you seen much success from using Patreon to monetize your podcast?
It's been slow going. It's been slow going at first, yeah. So we just launched it a few months ago, I want to say. But yeah, we're just kind of we're getting a little bit of people, but not. I'd like to see more growth. I'll put it that way in the Patreon.
Well, it's still young and it's still growing, obviously, and you already have fans, so that is a congratulations, because my Patreon has none. So, and I launched it like a couple of years ago, so be proud of that. I also don't promote it, so there's that could be a reason why.
And my mom is one of the patrons, so I gotta say, so that's kind of cheating a little bit.
No, it's not. It's family supporting family. If my mom wanted to pay, my mom doesn't even support my podcast, so okay. No, she does. I'm kidding. I love my mother. Hopefully she doesn't hear this episode. But when you what is your release schedule? Like, how did you guys decide on the release schedule?
So we decided, because we were like, okay, what are we going to do? When we had this kind of initial meeting with, it was the three of us. And then at the time we had another co-host, Alan's cousin, Fred, was one of the founding members. And we kind of were like hashing it out, like, what are we going to do? And we didn't want to do like once a month, because that's, slow. That's going to be really impossible to kind of like build anything, but also, and because a lot of podcasts I listen to are mostly week to week, but we felt like we really just could not sustain that while providing the level of podcast that we wanted to do, because we all have full-time jobs and so many other obligations. I have my writing to deal with and stuff, where it's we'd have to record, watch the movie, edit, and do all that in a week, every week. I just didn't feel like, and we all kind of like, we're on the same page, where it's like, we're not going to be able to sustain that and make the product that we would be proud of. And, I'm like, but we were all kind of like, there are podcasts that we enjoy. Lore is one of them that is bi-weekly, that is still a very popular, very well-made podcast. And I've seen a lot of podcasts where they like launch with one, they're like, okay, we're going to make a podcast every week. And then after a few months, they like drop it down to like once every 2 weeks. And we're like, you know what? We're not going to burn out and do that. We're just going to launch every 2 weeks. And if at some point, if it becomes, like sustainable and we don't have to worry about weather obligations, we can maybe do once a week. But, that's definitely not something that's in the cards anytime soon. So we are really making, I think, the best podcast we can make bi-weekly.
That's great. No, and I like that you brought up the fact that there's some podcasts that go right out the gate, weekly episodes, and then they just slowly burn out over time, and they go from, you know, every week to bi-weekly to monthly, then to maybe, and then they just die off,
Yeah.
and they wonder why they're not getting any listeners. Um, so it's really smart that you guys did that and you all came together understanding that that was the important part. Like, we need to watch out for ourselves. I don't think podcasters actually take in how much work it is, specifically a movie podcast, because you have to spend at least 2 hours watching the movie. Then you have your podcasts are about 60 minutes, 60 minutes, six. It's about an hour long, correct?
Yeah. Usually they run about like 45 minutes to an hour, that range.
Yeah, and then there's the like 6 hours of editing the podcast afterwards with the audio, because that's a
Yep.
nightmare. So I like that you guys have that like bi-weekly. And what I want to know is, do you watch do you record and release the episode in the same week that you've recorded it, or is it goes out the week after?
So yeah, usually we try to get pretty ahead of it. So we have the episode that we're gonna, because what's today's the first, so we have the episode that comes out on the 7th already recorded. I still need to finish editing it, but I always like to be really ahead of it. Sometimes we'll even like be 2 or 3 episodes ahead, just so that we can like have some breathing room and we're not like rushed. Where, because I have been in that situation where it's like, okay, like we recorded like the day or two before, and I'm like we're trying to edit quickly at the last minute, since it's a pretty evergreen podcast where, it's not like it's a news podcast. We're not talking about the newest movies. We're talking about things that have been out for years and years and years.
Yeah.
There's no real, like, they're not going to expire necessarily. So we can get ahead. I can kind of have the time and be like, okay, if I didn't get to do as much editing as I wanted to this day, it's fine. I still have, 3 more days to do it. So yeah, we're always kind of very ahead of it. We're actually recording another episode tonight, so we're going to be like now 2 episodes ahead. So that's always really nice.
If I told you how many episodes I was ahead, you'll probably be very upset with me. But anyways, I'm a fan of having episodes in the can ready to go. So in case anything in life happens, because life happens, and we can like.
Yeah.
If you guys were always recording in person, the pandemic hit, you guys can't record. So then you're like,
Mhm.
oh no, until you figure out the solution. But having episodes in the can is such an important thing. And I can't stress it enough. So even if it's a brand new episode, you can still record some, or a brand new movie, you can record on previous episodes or stuff like that.
Mhm.
I'm interested in the division of labor with with your podcast. Like, you obviously are the editor, you handle all the editing for that, and Ariel handles the video editing, handles the podcast side, the YouTube side of everything.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, she does the kind of YouTube stuff. I do, the editing for the audio podcast. Alan does kind of some odd stuff. Like, he'll do like the little kind of promo title cards that we have for the YouTube videos, and also that we post on Instagram. So we each kind of do like a little bit. That's kind of the nice thing about it being the 3 of us. It's not all just on me. I do kind of take a lead on a lot of stuff. I kind of am the one who's kind of like pushing a lot of stuff
You're
forward.
more in the producer role as well as a host role.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly the perfect way to put it. And I do kind of stuff like, reaching out to guests and booking guests, but that's the thing, is they can always, whenever they are like, hey, they'll be like, hey, I'm talking to this person, would like they be a guest. So they kind of can fill in and do stuff too if I'm not able to, or they want to step up and do whatever. It's very kind of just like, laissez-faire, just
You have defined roles, but you're not beholden to them. Like, you have
Yeah.
I am the editor, you are the videographer, and the other person is, you're the handyman. You handle the cinematography, but you're like, I'll handle most of this role. Everybody else can pick at it if I need help with that. And I love that friendship building, that because when you're just, because I know from previous experience, when it's just you handling the whole caboodle of producing the podcast, it is a burnout waiting to happen.
Yeah, definitely. Because there was one of my because for a little while, me and Ariel both kind of did spin-off side podcasts that were just kind of we did once a month, and I did mine, and it was mine. So it was called Gateway Episodes, and basically it kind of started right when the pandemic started because it was just the premise of the show was if you're looking for a TV show, watch this episode and you'll see if you want to get into it or not. So kind of did that once a month for a year, starting in, I think it would have been July 2020, just to kind of give people something to watch, give me to watch. But it was a lot of work because it was all just me, and it was not just like, watching a movie, it was also like finding TV shows and doing all this stuff. And so I decided to kind of like after a year be like, okay, this is season 1. I have some tentative plans for a season 2. So I'm not going to just kind of continually do it so I don't get burned out, like we were saying, that I'm going to do probably once we hit a certain Patreon goal. We're going to kind of release season 2, and it's going to be like 8 episodes. But yeah, just so I don't get too burned out working all on my own on the show. And so I can focus really more on Underrated. I kind of like put that on hold to kind of like focus on Underrated.
All right, and I'm glad that you brought up Patreon again because I did have some questions about it before we end up the episode here. How did you come up with the tiers for your Patreon, the levels of your Patreon?
So honestly, I just kind of looked at a lot of other Patreons, a lot of other podcast Patreons, and a lot of other movie podcast Patreons, and just kind of saw what they were doing, what works for them. And a lot of them, are a lot like they're big. So I wanted to definitely scale back from what they were. But I wanted to kind of still be able to give people rewards. And even if somebody, a lot of things, I read like articles and stuff like that. And a lot of them said, don't necessarily do it for like this amount, don't do it for this amount. But I was like, you know what? I do want to give, even if people just want to put $1 in, like $1, like, talking about the Weekly Planet.
Yeah, they go from $1 to like $1 billion. I love that.
Talking about the Weekly Planet, they don't have a Patreon, but they have something very similar. They do where they're like, oh, like the way they put it is like if you saw $1 laying on the street and you would just kind of like not even worry about it and leave it there, like whatever you would do that in a month, just give that to us. And so that's kind of like that was kind of like a thing that really stuck with me, and that was kind of part of the mindset. Is like, all right, I'll do $1 tier option. So if somebody just wants to sign up for $1, like that's nothing a month, and get some people that way. And then I'll give an option for kind of like what would normally be a lower tier, the $3 tier, just in case people want to give a little bit more, we can give a little bit back. But it's kind of like whatever people want to give.
All right. No, I like that. I like that saying like, hey, if you want to support us, you can support us for the $1. It's gonna leave some things, but in the long run, we just appreciate your support. And do you give them shout outs on your episodes when you get a subscriber?
Yeah. We definitely, when we get a new patron, we give them a shout out. We always try to kind of like if people are giving us support, we want to like show it back, So patrons, of course, we'll give them a shout out, or if people even leave us a review or something like that, we always kind of try to, let them know. So we always try to be very much, if they're there for us, we want to be there for them.
I love that. And that's the only way you're going to grow, by creating that great community. Derick, we're coming up to the end of the episode. I'm going to jump off screen here. I'm going to let you take the front. Please let my audience know where they can listen to you, where they can find you, any links, anything you want to share with the audience. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so everybody, if you would like to listen to our podcast, it's called, as I said, Underrated. We're on all the podcasting apps. You can find us on all the social media websites. Just look up Undercast Company, and you'll find us there. We've got our link tree, so you can find all of our links just right there, linktree/Undercast Company. But please, if you like movies at all, give us a listen. We would really, really appreciate it so much. Tell us what kind of movies you want to hear from us. It means all the world. If any listeners we get, we're always very appreciative of it. Thank you.
Awesome. Derick, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the show, spending some time with us, sharing your love of films and sharing your love of podcasts with us. I can't wait to go back and listen to some more episodes. If you had one episode that you had to suggest to an audience to start, so the gatekeep to see if they like the podcast, what episode would you suggest? And that's where we're going to end the show, with that suggestion.
Okay. One episode. This is tough because I love so many of them. But I would say check out our episode on That Thing You Do. That was a really, really fun episode. We had a really cool guest. I mentioned earlier on being a fan of Beyond the Screenplay. We had Trisha Aran from that show guested on that episode. So that was a really cool episode. It was a movie that meant a lot to all of us. So I would say check that one out.
Awesome. So I'm going to definitely be having that one linked in the show notes down below so my audience can get connected. And I'm going to go listen to it because, hey, if the host of the podcast is saying it's a great episode, it's probably going to be one of the better episodes. Not that they're all bad, but it's probably the one that the one that will get you hooked up. So my audience, I want to thank you guys for listening. Do please go listen to Underrated. The show notes have all the links. Make sure you listen to that episode that Derick just said, The Thing You Do. And remember, guys, to always invest in yourself.